want, they won't let you just turn it on. Nobody knows it, right? It's gonna, used to be you could just slip it on, but right. So, so this is the third time that we've gotten together. It's always going to be a little bit different group. When you get 13 people on the team, there's always going to be a few that don't make it. So it's a kind of a rolling feast of these conversations that we're having. One of the things that I'm concerned about as we do this is that I've been giving a lot of attention to this whole idea. And so I have naturally developed some firm opinions. And one of those opinions is that it's very important that my opinions not dominate the conversation. So I'm really looking forward to y'all pushing back on things that I say, because if there's anything that we're doing about the process or what's going on here, you say, oh, that doesn't make sense to me, make sure you say it, because I want to be sure that we address any resistance that arises, because I think we're pretty representative of the community that to which we will be presenting our results come fall. And so I'd love for us to be able to work those out in this context rather than at a congregational meeting, which, you know, these can be crazy. So one of the things that I've noticed as a kind of pushback that I want to name, particularly with Jenny, with you here, is that some people are feeling like New Beginnings Redux. Well, what? We've already done this. Why are we doing this again? It's almost like saying that it didn't work the first time. I think the work that Pilgrim did 5 years ago, let me back up a sec. I think the process of New Beginnings was really brilliantly designed. I think it's a really solid process. And I think the work that we did was really great for us as Pilgrim. Particularly the conversations in the kind of small groups within people's homes. There was a real sense of cohesion that was created by that. I think the fact that Jenny, you and others got together afterwards and sort of kind of gathered up all the pieces and said, let's make something of this, and then presented it as this play, as a way of articulating the vision, was brilliant. And if you're not familiar with that, the play is actually on the Pilgrim website, so you can see all of this stuff, and we definitely want to build on the work that was done. And so I think what we're doing here is recognizing that work was a really pretty solid foundation. And if you look at where we thought we were going to be 5 years ago, when now it's 5 years later, it's not that we're not quite there yet. I mean, there's some things that we're making definite progress with, particularly around our use of the building. And in some ways, the connections that we have with the neighborhood, the people who live within the neighborhood of Pilgrim, there's some great things happening there. But the kind of vitality that was envisioned hasn't happened. And it really needs to happen. And so we want to build on that. We're not, I think to the degree to which there was anything about that process 5 years ago that didn't work, it was that we did not have the pastoral leadership that we needed at that point to put some kind of administrative legs under the vision. So part of what I think we need to be doing this summer is figuring out what are the kinds of policy changes that we're going to need to make this vision really happen. And it's 5 years later. So there may be changes in what we think, you know, how the vision develops. So one of the themes here is this kind of this vision. And one of the things that came up for us last week, and I wrote about this, was that there's this sort of balance between the vision of us as a people who are committed to social justice and to social change, that sort of putting a prophetic voice on how we're showing up in the world is a really important piece, as is our own, because we're not just this is kind of what Jerry, I think you were pointing to, and some of what Jenny was saying too, about this is not just a social service group. We are actually a church. There's actually something spiritually grounded here that ought to inform the way that we're behaving. And so it's sort of holding these together. And I think in part because the work I've done with the Center for Action and Contemplation, I'm kind of seeing those two poles. But after looking at it, I said, I think there's actually a third one, which is not just our own kind of individual connection to the divine, and not just how we understand the nature of God. How does that connect with how we act in the world? There's also, how are we with each other? And it goes back to what Reverend A was saying about the importance of relationship. So I think there are really three legs to that stool, not just two. But we'll kind of begin to develop that vision. One other thing. Oh, Rana, I'm so sorry. Yeah, we'll have the recording. I think the recording's going to work. Okay. Well, it's recorded on my computer, so as long as I'm talking, you're going to hear it fine. One of the things that Hardy said, and I can't remember whether you saw what he wrote to me. I should probably make sure that every time somebody writes something to me that it goes to everybody. One of his concerns had to do with preserving the identity of Pilgrim. And that got me to thinking about the kind of the fundamental nature of any organization is that it has to preserve itself. It has to continue. But any organization is also going to have to change as times change. So the question becomes, what are we preserving and what are we willing to let go? I want to preserve my bank account, but I also want to buy those shoes. So I balance these things. And so I want us to be thinking about, quite specifically, what is it about Pilgrim that is essential that we preserve? We can't let this go. But preservation is the first of what I envision as kind of four steps in the evolution of any organization. The part of it is what are we preserving, in terms of the institution. But a second thing is, as we bring people in, as we hire new folks, or we have new members, or whatever it is that we're doing, as we bring people into the community, we teach them the culture. We inform them about who it is that we are. So one of the things we do in churches is we have confirmation classes, or we have new member classes. But there are other ways that we kind of say, hey, this is who we are. This is how we show up. So there's preservation, but there's also conformation. We're conforming to certain standards. And then, because we're not going to leave it the way it is, there's transformation. And that's when we start to get scared because, now things are changing. And after we do the transformation, there's celebration, that we're celebrating the transformation that we've had. So we go through preservation, confirmation, transformation, and celebration. And those are, as I see it, kind of a developmental process where you can't do the next step until you've done the previous one adequately. So just kind of, you want in there, Jerry? You're muted.
Okay, you asked for pushback.
Yeah.
Although if you want to go on through to celebration, if you were on a roll, you can keep rolling, but
I can find my way back. Go ahead.
Okay, I struggled with, when I was reading this, with what confirmation meant, and in this context, and now that you explain it, I see what you're thinking. And is this a process that you generated yourself?
Those 4 steps are things I identified. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And my first question was, okay, so how does preservation and conformation lead to transformation? Because I don't think that's linear. So I'm not sure that your idea that one builds upon the other really leads in and of itself to transformation. Because I think that needs something, if the transformation is going to be truly spirit-led, it needs to be led by the Spirit. And so that's just what I'm wondering, is it really one builds on the other, or is transformation hopefully infused into each of those other elements in order to really evolve?
Okay, well, let me just say that I think of it's kind of like learning to play jazz. you have to take care of your instrument. It has to be tuned right. You have to preserve the instrument. But then you've got to learn how to play scales. You know, how do you have to use the instrument. And you get really good at conforming to certain musical norms. And when you get good at that, you get to be able to you're creating something new. But the transformation doesn't happen without having built towards it. In terms of my capacity to be present to and expressive of the action of the Holy Spirit in my life, that requires that I first of all have conformed to certain spiritual practices that heighten my awareness. So it's not linear in exclusion. I mean, they're all happening all at the time, but my capacity to experience the transformative power of the Holy Spirit does depend upon me having it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm not going to care so much about how people think about me if I don't have a place to sleep tonight. Is that?
Yeah.
I don't think we're disagreeing. I think we're just.
No, we're not. I just think transformation is such a much broader process that it needs to be woven into each of these other elements. Otherwise, things become more transactional than transformational. And so if you're going to learn to play jazz, you need to develop the heart of jazz when you're learning the scales. But I can see it's a useful tool. Yeah, so enough said.
Okay. Yeah, Jenny?
Well, I would just say one more thing about how I understood it. To me, it fit with, something like Maslow's hierarchy. And I worked with something recently, and I'm not remembering the name of it, but it was kind of about your values and kind of the different values that are at the forefront at each level. And like the ground level is more like safety. And I think with anything like this, they overlap and they all have to be operating at the same time to some extent, but there are components that are more of a priority at different times. So I guess that's how I thought of it, that it wasn't just, that it wasn't linear in that only one is happening at a time, but there's kind of this overlap and a need to be able to hold them all at once, but identify what is our biggest priority right now.
Yeah, I like that. Oh, I'm sorry, Ron. I was just gonna say I like that. And think of it more as a layer cake than a pie, where you section the pie off. Okay, so enough said.
I was going to use a basketball analogy because in the beginning, when James Naismith discovered basketball, you had shooting, you had dribbling, you had passing. You didn't have dunking. You didn't have three-point shooting, which is the game. So the game that he invented, he would not recognize today because it has transformed. It has transformed because of the players. It has transformed because of the different skills. It has transformed because of the natural ability within the game. So to me, that's kind of what I see, kind of what Mark is saying, and for me, that seems to fit, because as you work at something and you see some other things and you incorporate those into that, then that's going to differ from the basic principles, just like in basketball.
Good. Well, that's a theme that I think at some point I'm rather imagining we're going to come back to, just in terms of. But for me, the issue is that a local congregation can be all about preservation and confirmation and totally leave out transformation, and the celebration becomes kind of hollow. It's just what we've always done. Whereas if we really want to deepen into the fullest experience of what's possible for us, we need to incorporate all four. So, Rana, did you want to?
Well, I just want to throw this out here because I just keep having this image of, the thing about the folks describing the elephant from different perspectives, and that's exactly where I see us, is that, folks have come to Pilgrim at different stages in its development and experience it so differently. So what I want to preserve and what, people who have been there for 60 years want to preserve are different things, I think. And that's what, so it's, it's just that it's always changing, and it has changed. And I think that's why it's good to identify these things that are, what is it that we've got to hold on to? Or do we want to hold on to, that we think God has got something, that's the spark that can help us to move into a new thing. So
So what comes up for me, Rana, as you say that, is that, yeah, there are people who are going to want to preserve something that I don't think is essential.
mhm.
So we're gonna put our priorities in different places. So that's why I want us to be thinking about what do we each see as being kind of the essential things that need to be preserved. For me, it's not the pews. I don't have to worship in pews. For some people, that's just, it's not worship if you're not sitting in a pew. Right. So how do we address the fact that we do see things differently, and we are hanging on to different aspects of what it means to be pilgrim? Okay, so we're gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna let go of the preservation notion here and move up for a moment into conformation, which is part of what we're doing when we're saying we are people of faith, of a particular faith, following a particular set of beliefs, because we see that we're not just preserving traditions, we're living into them in a way that conforms us to a way of being that is actually different from the world around us, where there's a sense in which what we're doing is countercultural. And so I asked Richard if he would present to us about his work with this Jesus pattern thing, and because we're going to be losing the Davenports for a few weeks here, and I wanted to be sure that we all had access to this perspective. We're talking, noticing that we all have different perspectives here. I want to be sure that we get this in front of us. So Richard has agreed to walk us through at least a part of it. So take it away.
Well, thank you. This is a website if you wanted to go to it. I must say we're in a change right now with the nonprofit I head, and so this is not a perfect website, but it is Jesus patterned biblical spirituality.org. And there's some great thinkers on there that are doing what I would suggest is probably the most useful thing, maybe this conversation, when I hear you pressing that, is exploring the imagination of how our sense of what is most central, what is worth preserving, might look today. Right? I loved Ron's example of basketball. There's how do we look forward? So there's a Walt Whitman quote that I'm find useful right these days. Very simple, 4 words. It says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And especially when I'm meeting someone different than myself, rather than judge them, maybe they're even contrary to me, maybe they even condemn me. Asking questions is being curious. Making judgments, not so. There's a woman that a lot of us have had brushes with in circles of change and progress, in Christianity, Phyllis Tickle. She just passed not long ago, a Memphis lady, Episcopalian, probably certainly for her generation, maybe the foremost religious woman in terms of publishing and writing of her era. She spoke at Eden Theological Seminary at the big convocation that they have every year. This years ago, and I'm just going to use what she said as an example. I'm not trying to force it, but it's an example of trying to get outside the, as I would call it, football analogy, outside the 40-yard lines. Because if you play the game between the 40-yard lines, there's a lot you can do, but scoring is usually not one of them. So she was talking to a group of largely UCC pastors. And she's a Tennessee grandmother, and she talks in a folksy way with no notes. Very sharp lady. She leaned over her podium and she said, "I'm sorry to tell you the truth. I got to tell you, I wish I didn't have to, but that doctrine of atonement you've been preaching for so long, it ain't working." Think of the imagination here that she goes through. She said, there's no way that an omniscient God can't figure out how to deal with your sin other than killing his own son. And then she said, we don't need a daddy like that. That's one example of deconstructing something. Some of the pastors, by the way, the pastors were very enthusiastic about what she went through, and that's just a short summary of it. But there were some who said, if I don't tell people they're going to hell, why would they want to listen to me? If I don't offer them this remedy that I have the authority to explain, what would they do? You had a fellow that is still writing some of the most poignant books right now, including talking about faith and doubt together, named Brian McLaren. Phyllis called him the Martin Luther of our age. His book just published, he has many others, including some wonderful novels that explore faith, are great examples of looking at things we thought never should touch. So in what I'm working with, Jesus Pattern Biblical Spirituality, it is something that others have talked about. It's using Jesus as a lens, maybe a corrective lens, by which to view our faith. And these are qualities that people talk about that they search for in faith: belonging, making sense of life and choices, reframing the past, having hope for tomorrow, dealing constructively with today, and very, very much loving and feeling loved deeply, unconditionally, and with satisfaction. On our website, we sum these up with 8 words: reimagining community, reconstructing faith, restoring hope, and renewing love. We have a lot of religious belief that's layered with cultural norms more than spiritual foundations. And the Jesus pattern is largely about deconstructing those things. I didn't particularly learn until much later in my life, as I got to know scripture with other ears, different lenses, and hopefully a larger heart. Jesus' first words in Matthew's gospel, I'm reading from the Common English translation, is change your hearts and lives. Here comes the kingdom of heaven. What is he changing regarding the hearts and lives of his Jewish audience? These are his first words. I always think that must have been done with some intent. Well, his immediate next words are the Beatitudes at the start of chapter 5. But then from verse 17 through 48 of this sacred Sermon on the Mount, the part we really never hear preached about a lot because the Beatitudes are so happy. But he goes through and he deconstructs 6 of the major beliefs of his audience tied to Moses. He offers a reconstructed understanding, and he asserts his authority to do so. So by that, this website and the community we're forming around it says that we apply the Jesus pattern, not things about Jesus, but what did he do? Who did he do it with? We allow that to be a lens of what we should perpetuate from Jewish scriptures. It isn't a religion about Jesus. It tries to seek the spirituality of Jesus, where he sought his connections, how broadly he did, how they upset people. It's offered a way to stand back and look at things, taking things that were taught to us in a certain framework, like the Samaritan woman at the well, who he encounters. What radicality there is there, that he comes to her, and what does he do? Ask questions. He's curious about her and asking things. You don't talk to women about theology in those days. She was there alone at midday because that was one way of avoiding what the women back that came there in the morning all together would say about her. And he finds things redemptive in her. He gives her a view of herself she couldn't imagine. And she runs and brings people to him. Just interesting ideas of reconstructing things we thought we knew. Jesus mentions a lot of things from Jewish scripture. Some of it he repackages, and a lot of it from Jewish scripture he never mentions. So we have questions. Why does he advance what he does? Inclusion, compassion, humanity. What does he do with it? He furthers the expression of that. And why does he mention the others? Judgment, condemnation, rules, laws. Could it be that those are not the most important things in the Jewish Testament? They're not worthy of perpetuation. Jesus doesn't make them principles of his faith. Should we make them the core of ours? And those are a lot of things the people who are turned off church complain about. That's a basic summary. Any questions, I'll be happy to entertain, but we've had a good time. This is Jesus pattern biblical spirituality, not biblical religion. How do you find meaning, purpose, connection, calling, community, your spirituality, your creativity, as my wife is working on in her area? This is being done in a variety of ways today. So I offer that.
Thank you, Richard. And I will put a link to that website out in the email to folks following this to make sure everybody can easily find it. Welcome, Hardy.
Thank you. I was at the VA and I had to get blood work and urine work done, so I'm running late.
Okay, I'm glad you could join us.
Thank you.
So responses to what Richard has just said. Let's talk about that a bit. Well, I'll give a couple of things that I noticed is that we live in a time in which what it means to be Christian is somewhat in dispute. We have different ways, people define what that means in different ways, to the point where at times when people ask me if I'm Christian, I don't want to say yes, you know. But a couple of them that came up in terms of what Richard just shared with us. One was, how do we understand why it was that Jesus died on the cross? That's pretty central. And what is our response to Jesus now? Is what we are about as a church worshiping Jesus, or is it about following Jesus? And those end up looking quite different. So I think for our purposes, one of the things is, as we're thinking about how do we envision the future of Pilgrim, there's some kind of theological stances that we may need to take that say this is even to go back to preservation, what is the core identity of Pilgrim that we are preserving?
I was really struck by the opening quote that you shared from Walt Whitman that you used to kind of frame this way of thinking and being about, you know, be curious, not judgmental. Because I feel like that's definitely key to transformation. And I don't know, I feel like that just accomplishes a lot when a group of people is trying to work together to create something new, or and also to figure out what they want to keep, but just how to move forward. And I feel like that just really sets you free to have whatever challenges you encounter become opportunities, you know, either to learn or to be inspired, or just to gain new skills individually and collectively. So that really resonated with me.
I guess for me, it was the action part, because I know, speaking at least for my daughter, I can get her, if I have something that we're doing in the program, like the crop walk or participating in the Pride Fest, or doing something that involves an activity, then I usually can get her to do that. Because for her, that's a key point for her, is an action, something taking place, as opposed to just talking about something.
I think that's very contemporary too. Kathy Escobar, who pastors a church, founded and pastors a church in North Denver called The Refuge, has written a couple of really keen books. One, the most recent one, is called Practicing, and she reduces the Christian discipleship to the action of which you're speaking. And she said something that was very hard for me to hear. I had her speak at this virtual summit, which is on the website that I mentioned, and that Mark will give you the URL for. He said, the world is not thirsting for more theology. And for those of us who love to talk about theology, who think good theology can help, but it's no substitute, it's still hard to think that. And I think action is what it's all about. And you can arrest people in a lot of different ways. I'm going to grab a very quick photo and see if I can get it for you. Just a moment. You all see this okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I did a big program around this. It's by a Vermont artist. And I just said, when this appears, it spurs the imagination of a lot of people. They love it. To others, this Jesus, the saying here is, I was a stranger and you welcomed me, Jesus. This picture of Jesus also unsettles people because it's not familiar. They can't see themselves in it. I remember Sunday school curriculum I used to thoughtlessly include that had that red hair, blue-eyed Norwegian Jesus. And I think there's a lot that becomes the question about this. I asked questions of the audience. I said, if this man appeared at the window of your car at an intersection, would you roll down the window? All kinds of questions get prompted. And I would say art is another way of doing this beyond just words. People sitting with something, reflecting on it, talking to it, voicing it, journaling it. We need to get that conversation open, big. And I think that could be something that would surprise a lot of people, to put a picture of that out with Jesus on the bottom. I was a stranger and you welcomed me in. Matthew 25, incredibly 31 to 46, one of the really precious portions of scripture about how are we to, as Mark said, to not just follow Jesus, but become more like Jesus. We can do that when we elevate our own identity and make sure we keep in touch with Jesus' own humanity. He said, our Father, my Father, and yours. A lot, and that doesn't keep him from being unique and distinctive and on the cross doing something unlike any other. But it might be to help us awaken to seeing Jesus in each other, the sacred, the holy, in everyone we meet, and people feeling that. And so I just wanted to show that one example. Any other comments?
I would just say about that picture that I don't think without the crown of thorns, we would even recognize that person as a Jesus image. And it's a little hard to tell whether it's a man or a woman. You know, it's like, where's the beard?
Yeah. Well, I got that at a Richard Rohr demonstration. We were at a conference and we had a vigil, and we were all given pictures like this to carry, also of Mary Magdalene. Things that just blow our mind. But particularly talking to a lot in the female, in the women, in the female audience, we have to recover this idea where it's still Peter's out there, despite the fact the Vatican rejected it many years ago, that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. There's simply no evidence of that. There's evidence that she did support the disciples through her abundance. She apparently was a pretty sharp businesswoman. Yes, she was healed of sins. We aren't told exactly what those were. The fact that sometime past, it was found we could diminish her by saying they were sexual. We missed that by rediscovering her. And I would say that's a very powerful point. Same thing about the woman at the well in Samaria. Do we think that the idea that she has been married many times and is now with a man, living with a man who isn't her husband, suggests that she's been sleeping around? She was married to these people. She wasn't, loose or promiscuous according to anything in that account. But it's been convenient to denigrate her and put her under, like people in her village probably did. I'm just throwing that out because I think it's part of re-envisioning and helping people see, because I think a lot of people will be excited to see some of these discussions fall away. Too many times, as an example, it's a book I'm really enjoying that Mark has referenced here, about mystical evangelism, refers to the idea that people say that every sermon they've ever heard on sex is judgmental and condemning of behaviors, usually outside of marriage.
Yeah, certainly. Nobody ever used these words with me, but the image that I got was sex is dirty. Save it for someone you love.
Save it for someone you love. The basic line in Christian communities is two phrases about sex. Don't do it before you're married. After you're married, we don't want to know about it. Don't talk about it. And when is the last time you heard in a pulpit someone talk about sexual abuse? Probably at Pilgrim, but it's something a lot of people have never heard, that sex misused and abusive and hurtful in many contexts is something that could be recoverable. How do you address that so people's experiences don't feel out of place and just judge one more time in church.
Any other responses to what Richard shared with us here? So what are the implications of any of this, either what Richard shared or what your reactions are to it? How does this inform the, if it does, where we're going in terms of how we're envisioning the future of Pilgrim?
I want to say that I can't help but think of our limitations. I'm thinking of our congregation. Prior to us growing, I think the median age is somewhere in the 60s. And so I too visited the first Congregational Church in Memphis. And I was shocked because everybody was standing up. And when I think of our congregation here, no way would I see that kind of thing happen. And a lot of movement. Let's go over here, let's go over there. It's wonderful to have grandiose ideas, but we might have to take baby steps to get certain changes made, because when you get into your 60s, you become kind of rigid. You're set in your ways. And it's easy to say, I want change, let's have change. But you might lose people when you try to get them to change too much.
Let me respond to that a little bit. I'm in terms of the process of change that we may be creating here at Pilgrim, is that certainly there's nothing we can expect is going to change from our process until at the earliest when we present to the congregational meeting in the fall. And what we will be presenting then, as I'm imagining it, are 2, 3, 4, maybe at the max, recommendations for policy. For this is the development of a particular policy or practice, which would then be implemented maybe as soon as a year from now, at the earliest. I mean, we know how rapidly any local congregation changes, so we're not talking about anything happening fast. But what are the changes we can make that will have the most positive impact on the future? For me, one of the positive impacts is necessarily going to be that the congregation invites people who are not currently members to join into it. So yeah, if we're limited to the things that those of us who are already active members can do, that's a somewhat more narrow range than what we think Pilgrim in the future could do. I mean, that's one of the things I think that's brilliant about the play that Jenny and others put together 5 years ago, was it envisioned a way of being the church that is including folks who are not currently members. And it's a way of inviting folks in. So yeah, Connie, I take your point. There's some things that we might think we want to do in terms of programs that we can't stand that long. But if we're going to persist into the future, we're going to have to attract a bunch of folks who are not currently. There's something that we're going to be doing that's got them saying, hey, I want to be a part of that.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the minister, because as chair of worship and music, we have had several surveys throughout the years. And I can recall reading one survey, a lot of churches had Friends and Family Sunday. And so many people responded. At this point, I'm not inviting my friends or family, so it's driven by the minister, what's happening in our pulpit, I think. And delight or exhilaration, however we feel following service. I can remember a time when I was hearing so much doom and gloom. That's something I hope I never hear again. That I was like, I'll only come because my parents want me to, but I sure am not enjoying this. And that's okay. I'll teach Sunday school so I can miss the service, And so if we're feeling, oh, wonderful, and I have felt that way many times, like, oh, good, that's the way I like to start my week. Then you invite your friends and family because you want to share the good things that are happening. We already have music that is just delighting. It's wonderful on Zoom to see people just moving, and we're singing loud since we're muted. I sing so loudly. Just enjoying ourselves. So the music is fitting the bill for me. And I do see good things happening with Reverend Anthony. But I think that's when we start to make changes and say, let's bring more folks in.
Mark,
Sure.
I sent Mark a letter, but I wasn't available last week. But you're right. We have to get more people in the church. I mentioned that it's not just the music, but we have to get some high level people like the CEO of the Urban League to speak at our church and invite everybody. The key is we just have to get more and more people in the church. I read something this morning about another church in Phoenix where my daughter goes to church, and she indicated that again they stand up, and those that cannot stand, they can sit. So the key is an active church. Even though we have a lot of members that are older, we can still perform. We had one time when Miss Blair was around, had Education Sunday, get teachers and all kind of people to come to our church, and some people will join. So that's just a comment I want to make.
So let me just say that part of what I'm hearing here is this goes back to what Ron was saying about getting his daughter to come to church. There's certain kinds of activities that are attractors. That this is something that will draw people to the church. Having some notable person speak, or having really spirited music, or being a part of some mission activity. To keep in mind that there's certain kinds of things that we can do that will draw people in to be curious and want to know more about Pilgrim.
But if there's nothing beyond that, they're going to come the one Sunday, and then they're going to come back, the next Sunday. And if it's not, so I fear that we got to get away from the like that the pastor or the dynamics is what it's about. I mean, I don't think, you know, I don't want us to think of how are we being like Jesus, not how are we, you know, that you were just saying was, um, if we're not transformed, if we're not different, then I think it's we're just following some leader and not really changing in our own daily lives. And so I'm not saying it very well, but I think every church is out there trying to figure out how to attract people. And I think the way you attract people is by feeling a sense of belonging and joining together in action towards something. So it's just not a passive activity, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So.
I agree. And I was, thank you, Ronna, because I was struggling to try to kind of articulate something similar to that. I think that for me, it's kind of, you know, how can we as pilgrims kind of come up with a, I'll just say focus, for lack of a better word, that people can participate in many different ways, and that's personally important, you know, that really is meaningful to each person wherever they are. There was something that somebody said during one of our new beginning discussions, you know, when we were talking about what Pilgrim has been, what Pilgrim could be, and kind of what this person said is, I just want to go to church. You know, I just want to be in church at Pilgrim. And, you know, that should be okay. There should be a way for people who want to engage, you know, in that way, that's what's most personally important to them can do it. And then but there's a way for everybody to grab on and, you know, be fulfilled and feel like they're contributing. Again, I think just that personal connection is so important. So how do we build something that really, you know, lets people feel that in a wide variety of ways, that, you know, whatever is most important for them. And yeah, I just really agree that, I mean, I think the, you know, the leadership is important, but it's not at the heart of it. And I think it's getting that focus in a way that, you know, people can understand and figure out how they fit in or could fit in, or how they can contribute and be creative. Yeah. And yeah.
I think those are really good concerns, all of them. Only thing I'll float out there, so we, some churches, it may not be the path for Pilgrim, but they have also looked at, for instance, a variety of adult ed opportunities. Some people want to learn a pretty traditional Bible study. That's great. Others want to read a contemporary book. Others want to talk about writing letters to prisoners. There's a variety of things. Also, what we found sometimes is that people have done things off of Sunday morning. It does seem sometimes when you do things off of Sunday morning, the concern about trying new things is lessened a little bit, because it's optional. But there are different types of small groups. To the celebration idea, and I haven't been to worship with you all. I'm looking forward to doing it in person, but I will. I still also think I may try Zooming you all in, but we have found sometimes people who would do a different type of service, maybe Sunday evening or an earlier one on Sunday. That has the challenge of dividing a little bit Sunday morning, but they've also done things. Maybe they want to get together in someone's home on Tuesday night or Friday night in the fellowship hall to watch a movie night. Different things appealing to different people where they are. But I do appreciate all you're saying, and particularly the emphasis on transformation within us, but also not limiting the leadership to just pastor, however extraordinary he is. And I think Kevin is.
We've had many ministers, but the church is the people. And there are many of us who look, oh, good, I have to tell Nancy something when I get to church, who look forward to seeing our friends at church. We have our church for family and feel that strongly. And so it is one good thing if our minister is really inspiring us and energizing us. But many at Pilgrim want to see each other. And that was evidenced with the Seeds of Hope and the health fairs on the parking lot, how everyone just wanted to gather. My mother was one, Daddy used to say, oh, you're going to close the church again, because she had to talk to everybody before she left. Mm-hmm. So we don't have a big battle. We're not facing any big blocks because we have people who enjoy each other's company. And that's why Rana was doing a great job as fourth faith formation leader, having so many gather at Helen Davis's home. I was unfortunately unable to do so, but we see that we do enjoy getting together. And that's a plus. That's a plus. We're not like starting from square one or anything.
I think we just need to have some, I keep saying I've had the chance, because I've had the membership hat, to get to know people during this pandemic, and it's been wonderful. But it feels a lot of the time like it doesn't always spread, that it's kind of me to this person, me to this person, and then, like there's somehow I'm supposed to share with other people what's going on with people, and rather than them checking in with each other. So that sense of community, I guess, is what I'm trying to nurture and make happen. And it's hard in a pandemic. So as we get back together, though, I feel like that's something we need to put some energy into. If it's a retreat, or if it's some time away with each other, or if it's, some regular social time that we kind of try to really nurture, so that as many people as can get together can. Because I think the events like the meet and greet for Reverend A, that was another example of how people really enjoyed that. And we were just, you just got to be together and be relaxed and tell stories and talk about what brought you to Pilgrim and all that kind of stuff. And I think, and that had happened within the book groups, but not everybody participated in book groups, so it's like, how to make sure that everyone has access to those kinds of experiences is what I'm hoping, because I think if we could form a sense of community like that, then we would know what we could figure out what those things we were wanting to preserve are. Because right now it feels like they're too disparate. They're too, I mean, I could tell you what I think these 5 people want to preserve, and I can tell you what I think these 5 people want to preserve. But I think as a group, it would be hard for us to name those things. You know, this group of 13 people. So I want us to have some more of those conversations so we can say, well, what is it we're really wanting to hold on to?
So does that mean, Rana, that we need to have some other kinds of events in this conversation for us to do our work? Is there something else we need to do to kind of throw the net wider?
Yeah, that's been one of my gut reactions to this, is like, we could just talk and have wonderful ideas, but I don't think it's going to translate. And I keep thinking to myself, how am I going to explain this to the folks that I have built some new bonds with? And they look at things through a different filter, but you know, so I think it would be good to have, I don't know what it is. It's just some kind of, you know, popcorn question that we do a call around, and we say, okay, we're trying to ask, you know, what are 3 things that made you want to stay at Pilgrim? And then, you know, come up with a list of what did people say, you know. So it's just I'm just talking out, making things up, but you know, something that it doesn't just come out as there was a group that met off in silence and, you know, out in quiet, and then we came up with these ideas. I'm just afraid it's not going to resonate with folks. So I want it to resonate.
Well, we're actually a fairly large proportion of the worshiping congregation, but yeah, there's their perspectives that certainly aren't present in the room, and it makes really good sense for us to try to connect with folks and both hear what they have to say and let them know that they've been heard. I mean, we want to make this as smooth a process as possible.
I think that's what, you know, Jenny and Susan did throughout the other New Beginnings process was, you know, not everybody participated in the groups that we met in people's homes, but there was reporting kind of back out of those. And you know, the experience I had in the group I was in was completely different from somebody else's group, and I never really heard that. And I think in a sense, you know, we did try to bring together the similar themes and the things, and then we brought it all together at that retreat. So you know, there was a lot of attempt to keep trying to collect it. And I think that was the strength of that process, was that if you were part of any of it, you were part of all of it. I felt like, so I guess I'm just trying to say we need to do that again somehow.
So let's be thinking about how we would do that, because we want to create some kind of event that people are really going to want to come to, and have it be something that creates what we need to do our work. And so this is not something to be kind of casually put together. What do others of you think? Do you share Rana's concern about the parts of the congregation that aren't in this conversation at this point?
Sure.
we're still in the midst of the pandemic and we're hearing about the Delta variant. And so, you know, I've talked to several Pilgrim members who are saying, no, I'm not going back into the church anytime soon. Just like my bridge members, many do not want to play bridge in person. Many are very content with Zoom. And so we're, you know, this is still, we're at a crossroads. So we can't really plan, I think, until, well, we can plan, but it's difficult when we're so divided as to whether or not we're comfortable getting back into the church.
Yeah, I think we can be confident that at some point we're going to be past the pandemic, but we certainly can't be confident that we know when that is. So at least for the term that we are imagining this discernment team is going to function, we cannot anticipate having a broad in-person event. I'd love to have at some point this summer, if we all feel safe doing it, we can come over and have a picnic in my backyard so we're all in one place. But that's not going to do what Rana and Hardy and Connie are talking about here.
I apologize because I had to take a bio break and I missed some of the discussion, but if I'm understanding the question correctly, I wonder if as part of our work, you know, people in this group could commit to like each picking somebody who's not part of this group and having a one-on-one conversation with them, you know, maybe based on questions that we all agree upon ahead of time, just as part of our work, if we want to find ways to bring in other perspectives. And also perhaps if we, you know, if we get to a point where we have a couple of ideas that we want to get input on, to just use that as a way to gather data and bring in some of these other perspectives that aren't represented among this group.
Yeah, I'm imagining two kinds of things we might do. And certainly the form, are we going to individually talk to people or are we going to get people together into a conversation is one of the questions. But part of it is that we want to hear from people, but if we're going to hear from people, we have to ask them a question, and it has to be a question they've already got an answer to. Don't ask people questions they can't answer. It always bothers me when people ask me questions. I don't know. The other thing is that as we do our work, we may come to a kind of consensus about who Pilgrim is, about what we're conforming to, about, you know, something that needs to change, some kind of transformation. We may come to that and we may say, I don't think the rest of the congregation is going to buy this. And so that may be something that we want to say, okay, here's what to then go to the rest of the congregation and say, here's what the discernment team has been thinking. What do you think about this? So that we're getting feedback before we get to some congregational meeting in the fall. I don't think we've anywhere as close to having a consensus about much of anything at this point that we would take to folks, but we really want to move to something that we say, okay, here's what we think we all agree on. Let's float that out there and see.
Could it be like a like if we were saying about preserving, what do we want to preserve? And if we came up with 6 things that we think people in the church want to preserve, and then we say, are these things that people, I mean, you know, because I think they may add some things. Oh no, I don't care about that. I care about this. Or they may totally agree with us, and that'd be, you know, I mean, that'd be great. But it just feels a little bit like yeah, it's trying to understand this group that's so diverse in the, you know, what's brought them to Pilgrim and what, I think we all are kind of holding on to something at the church that we want to hold on to, but um, yeah, I just hear very different things from people. I just hear vastly different things. You know, want the church to go be, you know, we don't need the church at all. We need the church building. That's, you know, that's what this is all about. This is the church building and everything in between. So
Well, so let's just try that one, because that's a fairly concrete issue, seems to me. How do we relate to the building? On the one hand, the building is just, it's so much building. It's so much more building than we need. It takes all, you know, it takes so much resources. It's depleting us. We should just, we need to have an identity separate from the building. And this is a huge resource for the community. This is something that's really great for the neighborhood. We need to make sure that it remains available to serve the west end of St. Louis, right? And so how do we do both? So one of the things that we could do is we're going to say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to get create a separate not-for-profit which is going to manage the building. It's not up to the worshiping congregation. We don't manage our own finances. We give it to the United Church Funds and we let them do it. We are not skilled in asset management around money. We're not that skilled around asset management when it comes to a building. Let's give it to something created for that purpose. So we're going to let that go, right? How would people feel about, we're not, I mean, the worship, the legal entity, which is Pilgrim Congregational Church, United Church of Christ, would continue to own the building. But what we're going to say is we're going to create a board, a structure, a decision-making body, and they run the building. We're tenants in it. We pay rent to them. We support the building that way, but it's not our building in the sense that we're responsible for everything that happens. Now, some people are going to love that idea. Some people are going to hate it, I'm pretty sure. But that may be the kind of thing that we can float out there and just see how people respond to it. What's your response to that?
From a practical point of view, since we just got the settlement on the roof, and now we're about to get that prepared and just are getting our organ refurbished and all, I can't imagine us thinking of Pilgrim without this particular building, this historic site. I don't see that at all. That's me.
Let me just say that I can't imagine, even if we decided we were going to do this, I can't imagine it actually happening until at least a year from now. And I think the things that you're talking about, Connie, I hope they're all finished by a year from now. So this is on a longer time frame, but yeah, people really do identify with the building.
Mark, were you mainly using that as an example of the type of conversations we might have if we picked some kind of, you know, different scenarios for the future to then discuss and see how people?
Yeah, that's an example. It's an example that I think is pretty much going to have to be one of the things that we talk about, is our relationship with the building, because that's the requirement to take care of the building is one of the things that's challenging our vitality into the future, because it takes so much. I mean, it's a lot of building. This is exhausting.
We need to advertise the chapel for weddings. Did you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. We can advertise a chapel for weddings, and we could do a lot of stuff. We just got to stay open-minded, and hopefully, like you said, we can get back in a church and create different groups and parties to do different things. I participated in a soup kitchen, and I didn't realize how many people were down there and how they work so fervently together. And it was some folks from Washington University trying to do some things. So our church is a staple in the community. We just have to figure out a way to utilize the solid building itself and create more and more people to come in and utilize it.
So I think we agree that we need to figure out a way to utilize it better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anybody thinking that we need to let it sit empty.
But Ron Gauss is doing that for us.
Yeah.
He's a blessing to us.
Yeah,
he is.
A lot. And actually, the chapel will become available once we get air conditioning in there. And he's done his research to get that done. So, you know, we've had 2 different ministers who've been, one in the chapel and one holding services in our sanctuary.
Mhm.
So we're doing what needs to be done. The commissary, the kitchen as a commissary, my goodness. And Freedom Arts, we're on the way. So I just
Is it important that
it's like we're back at square one. Well, things are happening. Things are happening.
well, I think we can, yeah, but let me argue the other side of that for a moment. That's happening because of Ron Gauss. And Ron is not going to be our building manager forever. And so what will happen at some point when we don't have somebody who is as energetic and skilled as he is to make that happen? Is that something, because what has happened is that when there's nobody else to do it, the person who does it is our pastor. So do we want our pastor to be kind of the default person, or do we create another structure that's made up of people who are really skilled in building management, who may not be a part of our worshiping congregation? What they care about is the building. Now that's a huge shift in terms of how we think about the building, how we relate to it, that would solve the problem of its viability into the future, hopefully, if we got the right people in there. Ron's really clear that the building can support itself. The question is whether or not the sense of our identity as Pilgrim, the worshiping congregation, do we need, as a part of that identity, to have ownership of the building? I mean, legally we would continue to own it, but do we control the building? Or have we given over control to somebody else who's gonna advertise the chapel for weddings, it becomes their job to make that happen, rather than the job of those of us who gather for worship. And that's essentially my question. And that would be a question for us, but it's also then a question that we would want to put out to the rest of the congregation.
It also sounds like to me a question. It gets back to things that you want to preserve. And it sounds like the building is one of those things. And at least what you're suggesting, Mark, is like, it's like for the people that go, this building is a lot. Now you don't have to think about it because somebody else has to think about it. And for the people that say, yeah, preserving the building is real important. Well, you still got the building. You just don't have you just don't have to worry about activities and things that are going on because someone else is responsible for that.
So I'm just simply suggesting that as the kind of thing that we might float to the congregation in order to get feedback, just to kind of take the temperature. Does that sound like something you know, to address Rana's concern about including folks who aren't in this conversation, that we
Well,
include them in a way that we get feedback.
right, but I mean, I think it's dangerous to do it on the building, and so I guess I brought that up as a concrete example, but I think, as I've worked on helping different people move into independent living and assisted living, and how tied they are to their homes, and how hard it is for some people and how easy it is for others to say, oh, sure, yeah, if I don't, my mom gave her house away. She gave her house away, said, somebody else deal with all that. I don't want to deal with all that. She did exactly what you're saying to move herself into independent living. She didn't want all the headache of selling it and figuring out or whatever. And other people, it's just pulling teeth to get them to even think about leaving. So I think we're going to run into that because we've got all these elders and they're having to deal with that in their personal lives. Can I stay in this home? Do I need to move to another place? I need something central in this, and the building is that for them. And so I think so it's gonna be tough to have that particular part of it floated out there. I would like to get us to agree on what we care about as a community. Do we care about children? Do we care about hunger? Do we care about, I don't know what it is, but what is it that that almost all of us have a passion for and feel like God is calling us? That's what Pilgrim's about. Is it the diversity thing? I don't know what it is, but that's what I want us to talk about is, what makes us unique as Pilgrims. And I think our building is unique, but I don't think it defines who we are as a community.
So in that sense, this would not be a good thing for us to float because
It would divide.
it's not an identity. Well, it is for some people, but it's not a what is it we do kind of question. It's not about our mission.
Right. And so back to the analogy of the elders figuring out, it's like, what is the quality of life that you want to have? And, yes, okay, it's not safe for you to be in your home. There's steps. You can't go downstairs and do your laundry anymore. There's all these practical things that folks have to look at. But then what are the things that I want to not have to worry about meals anymore. My mom loved being able to have somebody else worry about meals for her. So that was an attraction to something else. So how to say, what is it that we want the church to be? Um, you know, what is it that we need from the church, but what also is it that we need to offer to the church? She wanted places to go, people to be friends. All of her friends couldn't get to her house. She had a steep driveway. They couldn't get up her driveway. So she decided to move into something else. But I just think Pilgrim, we're in a transformation in the sense that we're older, and a lot of us are older, and so what do the older folks need and want, and what do we need to be doing in the community that's going to draw new people to us? I think those are the two things I'd like to sort out.
Well said, Rana. And there are loaded words that can surely drive people away. And I think, yeah, that topic, those are words that
I'm sorry, which words?
about should we keep the building or should we turn the building over to someone else? Yeah, I think at this point.
So your sense is that if we even ask people the question, it's going to turn them off.
The thing is that I talk to a lot of our parishioners. I do. And so many have said, I want to be buried in this church. I want my child to get married in this church. They love Pilgrim. And many have asked me, fight for it, Connie, fight for Pilgrim. Do not let them, do not let them find a way to close our church. So I'm just speaking from, I'm very approachable. And as chair of worship and music, a lot of people do approach me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good.
Nancy?
Nancy?
I would say too that I think that the building is a very important part, frankly. The We talked in the New Beginnings earlier. What a lot of the things that we were going to be doing was related to the community where we were, where we are. That's where the building is. Now, mind you, now maybe this is just me, but right now, as far as giving the building over to another um, another management, but it's still our building, it's not too onerous to me because for me right now, frankly, in my own mind, I've given the building over to Betty and Ron Gauss, and I don't worry about I do worry about it, but I don't worry about the day to day of the building. But so if it is, if we sort of like hire people to look after the building, that would be, in my mind, okay. But I do think that the building, for me, the building's an important part of Pilgrim. I just want to say that, and I think it is for a lot of people. It is our identity, I think, and it's our identity because of where it's located, and because of its history and of a lot of things. And I think if we say, okay, let's get rid of the building, we'll just go off and we needed a storefront somewhere.
Mm-mm.
It's a lot. That's my okay.
Were you about to speak, Jenny?
No,
Okay.
I was trying to figure out if my screen had frozen because I think we were all just paused,
No,
taking everything in.
we're all just silent.
Yeah. I don't think, I think that Mark, what you're saying is not a bad idea, and I think that it's worth us mulling over. So I don't want to make it sound like I don't think that's a possibility. It's just that it sounds as dramatic to me as, in a way, I can hear it from some people's perspectives as being, you know, like it's not, not ours anymore. It's, they could do anything they wanted with it. They could change the way that Pilgrim functions completely. We might not be able to worship at the time we want to worship because they're have a group that can pay more to do worship in a different time. Those kinds of things would come up for people. And I just think that that is what folks were afraid of when the New Beginnings was happening before, was that, that someone was kind of trying to say that the building is onerous and shouldn't be, um, you know, and I think there's just somewhere in between. There's a combination that we can come up with that honors the heritage and preserves the church without, so anyway, I realize you're not saying something that's real far out there. It's just, I'm afraid if that's how it's going to be heard if we just bring it out now.
So I'm hearing a general consensus that we need to find ways to expand this conversation to include more of the congregation, and that we want to do it in such a way that what we're getting is really, good feedback from people about where it is that they are. And a piece of it is about kind of identity around, to what degree is our identity tied to the building. A piece of it is, to what degree are we making choices that are most likely to create longevity for Pilgrim as an institution? And to what degree is it that we are defining our identity in a way that fits what's important to me about Pilgrim, in terms of what is our mission, what do we do, what do we care about? So So there's like a couple of different pieces here.
Right. And if we can be playful and fun about it, which I know is asking a lot, but I think that there's something about sending out a survey and asking people to fill it out, or you know, that we've got to think of some ways of you know, finding joy in it too, as we're so that there's some, I don't know what it would be, but I just throw that out.
Well, as much as possible, I would like to have the conversation in person, but we do know that there's some people who are not going to do anything in person. I mean,
Right.
even if it's outside. I mean, we could have a picnic on the lawn some evening, but there are people who would not come in any case.
Well, we could have a Zoom party, and we could, you know, we could have people come into and do some kind of thing where it's a small group. It's not intimidating. It's, you know, we just invite you to this, and I don't know. I mean, I just think there could be other ways to have it in either small groups or.
So one question is the format for the conversation.
Mhm,
Another is what's the content of the conversation,
mhm.
and can we frame it in such a way that what we're getting back from folks is actually helpful for us in figuring out where we are and thus where we might be going.
Mhm.
Yeah, Jerry.
Just based on experiences that I've had of a similar nature working with different groups, church groups, is the more communicating you can do along the way in the process, the less surprise there will be at the end when it's all presented, and there will still be surprise at the end when it actually is unveiled, and people will go, but wait, what? What are you thinking? No matter how much you've told them. But the one-on-one works well. At one point, our leadership team actually met with every single person in our congregation. We took them out for lunch or dinner, and we just gathered information. We found out what their fears were, what their hopes were, and all of that we tried to factor in to some of what our proposal turned out to be. You're not going to please all the people all the time, but if you can address their primary fears, especially if you're introducing something that sounds radically different for a church. I mean, having a landlord, you know, owning a building but not running a building is not that unusual in housing situations. Or even if we had a home that we kept in California, we didn't live there anymore, but we hired a company to manage the property. It was our property, but we didn't control all of it. I mean, we did, you know, so you get the point. But of all the things that you've talked about, Ron, I especially like your idea that you need to involve the people in the process as best you can, so that because you're going to have time to mentally adjust to new ideas, and giving them an avenue to then process those ideas and talk about them, and make sure that their concerns are being heard and all of that. So, you know, from what I've been listening to, that's my experience says I think you're on the right track.
Do we have the list of the when we first did it, the people where they went to, and well, of course I know that Rita and I was that, and I remember some of the people that came to our home, but that might be at least a starting point, because at least these are people that you've had some previous connections to that might be helpful, and they were fairly, 5 to 6 people in that group. So that's just one suggestion.
I know that the list of people who participated is not on the website, so I don't know where it would be.
Okay.
Susan Brand's got it in a box in her basement, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's unique. You could get 4 or 5 people in different people's homes, or go to dinner or lunch and discuss it. Discuss
Well, and
opening up. Yeah.
right. And we've been talking about the 70+ group meeting again. Okay, well, that's a
Yeah.
different group, but that if we meet either online or whatever, and a couple of us, you know, brought information to them, and then they got their feedback as a group. And then, you know, if the second Friday group that usually goes out for happy hour or whatever, instead has a game night on Zoom, and then part of it we stop and we, you know, we talk about something, and then we, you know, so there's something that's drawing you together. The reason you're, you know, so you're just not just, I think it's hard for some folks to just feel like they, like, you know, Helen said she didn't feel like she's going to slow us down or something, and she wouldn't have, but she, you know, that's the experience a lot of people have, is that they don't, these kind of things are hard for them to be a part of.
So there, again, there feels to me like there's 2 different things we're talking about at the same time, though they certainly are related to each other. One is, what's the venue? What is the process by which we create these conversations? And it sounds like different people are going to be attracted to different kinds of conversations. So we're not maybe designing simply one way of having the conversation, but we do want to have something that is kind of the, what are we talking about? What's the
Content, yeah.
the content, or what are people bouncing off of? And so it seems to me that the building issue might be one. Are there others that might be something that would be, comes to mind for you as an issue for us to be talking about as we're looking at the future of Pilgrim?
What is our mission? What are, you know, who do we want to
Yep.
who do we think that we're, you know, that God is calling us to be in ministry with, or
But can we make that a set of options? Because it's a little open-ended that way. So because I'm thinking when it comes to the building, we've got like 3 different options. We can continue the relationship we have, we can move out, or we can have a management company, or some, you know, so those are 3 distinctly different things that we can do. And that way people can kind of bounce off of them. If you just say, well, what do you want the mission to be?
well, is it the hunger food pantry soup kitchen? Is it something related to children and literacy or whatever? Is it something related to gun violence and in the neighborhood? And I don't know. I guess those would be the ones that, you know, that I've heard, but I don't know if that's really.
So why don't we collectively make a list of what the things, what have we heard that might be, and we can have more than one priority. It's not like this is the one thing, but can we get a sense of, do we have a mission priority that seems particularly important to us, either because it's something we personally care about, or because we see it as being central to Pilgrim's identity? We're coming to the end of our time, but we're also coming to a place where I feel like I personally need to kind of ruminate on this for a while. And I think we can have a kind of conversation with ourselves by email. It feels to me like we maybe want to go 2 weeks before we meet again. What's your thought about that? Want to meet next week, or should we go to the first week? Is what the next week is July 1st.
The holiday is popping up. July 4th holiday is popping up.
Yeah. So what do you think? You want to meet on the 1st, or should we push it to the 8th?
The 8th.
I'd say the 8th.
Mark, I need to let you know that probably for me, starting right after the 8th, I'm going to be out of the picture until probably to the first week of August, because I'm a delegate for Synod,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm going on vacation to Florida after I finish that. So
Will
I'm
you
going to
be
be gone probably from the 11th of July to the 1st of August. That's just,
okay?
for me. So
But you could do the 8th.
yeah, I could do the 8th. Yeah.
Nancy.
I can't do the, I won't be able to do the, I don't think, probably, because I got something important, slightly, a few minutes after that, but I wouldn't be able to do the 8th. That's I could come for the first few minutes, but I'm okay next week. I'm okay after that.
So you could do next week, but not the 8th.
The 8th would be awkward. But I could do. I guess I could come from 3 to. Well, I don't know. I guess I could come from 3 to 3:30, something like that.
Okay.
That's I could do that. 3 to 3:30.
So the sense I'm getting is that we're not going to meet next week. We're going to meet on the 8th. We're going to be connecting by email. I'm going to kind of write up my notes on this and send the video out to folks who weren't able to be here. And of course, you all can watch it over again too. What are we talking about? All right. Good. I never know where this is going to go. I think that's a good thing. All right. Any class thoughts before we close for today?
Pray for Ron Gauss today.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all for showing up. This is important work that we're doing. This is incredibly important to me personally. It's certainly important to Pilgrim, but I think it's important to the larger church and in fact to the world that we're doing this work. So let us thank the Holy Spirit for being present with us as it inspires us to do this, as we seek to be the redeemed community that Jesus opened up for us as a possibility. And let's be safe out there.
All right. Thanks,
All
Mark.
right, thank
Thanks
you.
for organizing this.